Tashidelek, and welcome to Tibet This Week, where we bring you news on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's have a look at today's headlines. His Holiness the Dalai Lama inaugurates Khamgar Druk Dharmakara College. European Buddhist Union calls on Chinese government to stop interfering in Tibetan Buddhist affairs. Deputy Speaker Teykhang meets CEO of Zeropoint Rafal, Rohozinski. Delegation from Indian Association of Foreign Affairs Correspondents visits Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile. His Holiness the Dalai Lama congratulates Swiss-Tibetan Friendship Association on its 40th anniversary. Delegation of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh visits Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile. President and members of Japan's Flame of Hope visit Office of Tibet in Taiwan. First Non-Sectarian Tibetan Buddhist Scholars Conference held in Nepal. Human Rights Test and Tibet Museum completes speaking tour and exhibition in Indian universities across West Bengal and Sikkim. On Wednesday this week, His Holiness the Dalai Lama inaugurated the Khamgar Druk Dharmakara College of Buddhist Cultural and Welfare Charitable Trust located in Tashijong, Himachal Pradesh. His Holiness gave a short teaching at the inauguration and consecration ceremony. Khamgar Rinpoche, the head of the monastery, offered a mandala to His Holiness and spoke about the background of the Kamapagar monastery that was founded by first Khamgar Rinpoche with branches in Derke and other parts of Kham in Tibet. Rinpoche said the great fifth Dalai Lama and subsequent Dalai Lamas had close spiritual ties with the predecessors of Khamgar Rinpoche. The guest speaker at the ceremony included Kishori Lal, the local member of the Legislative Assembly, Tsering, President of the Central Tibetan Administration and Speaker Khenpo Sonam Temple of the 17th Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile. His Holiness in his address said the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which has been restricted by communist Chinese forces in Tibet, is flourishing because of the strong faith of the Tibetan people.
Chero samanaliya, che kanda nangbe shunganane, nangbe tadru kailanne, malane, nangbe shungne sungshewe, semkong riba tizute tonado siache chigina, wanatane lu dewa sem kiwa. Di gyuni, wanatane zamlin shiti siadi, sem shishi tuwa di tane, Zamli Shidi Yontiashari, Zamli Shidi Druge Sem Magata Chaudoda, Tindriki Shawando Sone, and Zamuli Tigala, Chicken Zoni Makshin Tango, Makshin Yiva, and Tanabe, Makshin Sumbe Churchichen, Dujin Sancha, Soyalia, Tonasha Diaro, Tindriki, Kanda something Lidiori. The Yongadi. In
a declaration adopted unanimously during its annual general meeting on 24th September, the European Buddhist Union called on the Chinese government not to interfere in Tibetan Buddhist affairs, namely the recognition of the reincarnation of high lamas, including His Holiness the Dalai Lama. This comes on the heels of the Chinese government's recent promulgation of the administrative measures for religious activity venues, also known as Order Number 19, that came into effect on 1st September 2023, which will further intensify the ongoing religious repression in Tibet and elsewhere in China. In addition, they also called on the Chinese government to resume dialogue with the representatives of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in order to resolve the Sino-Tibetan conflict. Representative Rizhi Gengar, welcoming the timely initiative, expressed her appreciation to the EBU for endorsing His Holiness' view on the matter. The European Buddhist Union is an international umbrella association of Buddhist organizations and national Buddhist unions in Europe. On Tuesday this week, Rafal Rohozinski, the CEO of Zeropoint, a cybersecurity analytics group, visited the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile and met with Deputy Speaker Teykhang to talk on digital security. The Deputy Speaker discussed strengthening the Tibetan Computer Resource Center to guard the CTA and the Tibetan people on its digital transition with the expertise from Zeropoint and on encouraging constructive engagement from the Tibetan diaspora. The CEO of Zeropoint apprised the Deputy Speaker on his project of building and sustaining digital security for the CTA to protect Tibetan culture, language and identity and keep the momentum of the issue going. On Tuesday this week, a delegation of journalists from the Indian Association of Foreign Affairs Correspondents visited the Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile. Meeting the senior journalist, Deputy Speaker Teykhang delved on the current alarming situation inside of Tibet, significance of Tibetan plateau on world environment and numerous other issues concerning Tibet. Deputy Speaker spoke on the need for more coverage on Tibet's issue in the media and emphasized that the world needs to acknowledge Tibet's non-violent approach of seeking genuine autonomy under the guidance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The delegation consisted of Suhasini Haider, diplomatic editor, The Hindu, Nayanima Basu, editor, Diplomacy and Defense, and news editor of ABP Live, and Sachin Budolia, special correspondent of UNI Univarta. The primary objective of their visit is to provide the delegation with a comprehensive understanding of various aspects related to the Tibetan issue, the Central Tibetan Administration, its activities, and the current situation in Tibet. The visitation program was organized under the coordination of India-Tibet Coordination Office, and delegates were accompanied by the ITCO's coordinator, Thupten Rinzin, and staff Tsering. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has sent greetings to the board members of the Swiss-Tibetan Friendship Association on their 40th anniversary, which was celebrated in Zurich, Switzerland on 23rd September. Tsering of the Tibet Bureau presented the written message from His Holiness the Dalai Lama to the President of the Association, Thomas Buckley, during the ceremony. In the written message, His Holiness commended Switzerland for being one of the largest host countries since the 1960s for the Tibetan communities beside the Indian subcontinents. His Holiness thanked the people and government of Switzerland for being gracious to the Tibetan people. The ceremony was attended by the abbot of the Tibetan Institute Rikon, Venerable Thupten Lekmen, Tsering from the Tibet Bureau Geneva, Swiss parliamentarians, Honorable Fabian Molina and Honorable Priska Bera-Himo, joined by Honorable Mario Ferrer, head of the Department of Security, Zurich Canton, Vice President of TCSL, amongst other guests and members of the association. The Swiss-Tibetan Friendship Association was formed in 1983 to stand in solidarity with the Tibetan people and support the just cause of Tibet. The association is one of the oldest Tibet support groups. The delegation of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh from North Zone visited Tibetan Parliament-in-Exile and met with Deputy Speaker Teykhang on 23rd September. The RSS delegation were taken on a guided tour of the Parliament Hall and were briefed on the evolution of Tibetan democracy in exile, composition and functioning of the Tibetan Parliament in exile, and the CTA's objective of resolving the Sino-Tibetan conflict. Extending gratitude to the India and its people for their long-standing support to the just cause of Tibet, the Deputy Speaker appealed to the delegates to carry forward the message of Tibet to the respective regions in India. A delegation of Japan's Flame of Hope, led by its president Rokyo Endo, paid a visit to the Office of Tibet in Taiwan last Friday. The purpose of their visit, as per the information reiterated by the Rokyo Endo, is to discuss their upcoming campaign in Taiwan. Representative Kesang Gezebawa, along with the office staff, received the visiting delegation and introduced them to the roles and responsibilities of the office. Besides the office staff, the welcome reception of the visiting delegation was joined by the President and Vice President of Taiwan's Tibetan Association. The Office of Tibet in Nepal and the Himalayan Buddhist Library and Cultural Center organized the first non-sectarian Tibetan Buddhist Scholars Conference in Nepal at the Dolma Monastery in Tinchuli near Bodhanath Stupa on 22nd September. The conference seeks to introduce the Tibetan Buddhist traditions in Nepal, spread interreligious harmony, and discuss the preservation of the traditions through theory and practice, as well as the origination of their distinct characteristics. Tamang Tulku Lobsang Namgye Rinpoche presided over as the chief guest, while other guests included the abbot of different traditions, vice chairman of the Nepal Buddhist Associations, president and executive members of each tradition, Tibetan settlement officers of Kathmandu, Pokhara and Shavara, representatives of the governmental organizations and local bodies, which brought the total number of attendees to around 350. The UN, EU and Human Rights Desk at the Department of Information and International Relations, Central Tibetan Administration, together with the Tibet Museum, has completed its 2-week-long speaking tour covering 4 institutes and 1 school across West Bengal cities, including Kolkata, Siliguri, Darjeeling and Gangtok in Sikkim. During the speaking tour, the staff of the DIR discussed the current human rights situation in Tibet and why resolving the Sino-Tibet conflict is important to India and to the rest of the world. Moreover, the 2 speakers urged Indian college students to raise their voices against China's deplorable human rights record in Tibet in their writings and articles and to publish them in journals to keep Tibet at the forefront of public attention. Staffs from the Tibet Museum presented an exhibition about the long-standing relations between India and Tibet and the strong ties that existed between the 2 nations in the past as well as to this day. The DIR speaking tour garnered a resoundingly positive responses covering approximately 450 students and faculties. That is all the news for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. Thank you for watching Tibet TV.